to Society Media for inviting me to speak in this series, and thank you all very much for coming. Now, the talk, as Michael said, has been titled by Society Media as "The Arts Can Help Save the Planet." I'd rather title it as a question. Can the arts help save the planet? Because it hasn't yet been proved with certainty that the arts can do that. But my aim is to share some ideas with you about how our network, called Mission Models Money, or MMM for short, is beginning to excavate a path that might lead to an answer to that question, one which we believe will be a yes. But before I lay out our stall in a way that I hope will be persuasive and compelling, and in a way that will leave you fired up and thinking anew about the power of art and culture to help us tackle perhaps the most profound set of global challenges humanity has ever faced, a few words about MMM. As I said, we're a network, creative adhocracy in the language of organisational structures, a group of professionals from the arts and wider civil society who've been working together over the last 6 years to help transform the way the arts use their resources to support the creation and experience of great art. Working primarily with the professionalised arts, theatres, galleries, orchestras, opera and dance companies, festivals and museums, we've been pushing the envelope around a whole range of issues, from how the arts might become better capitalised financially to how arts and cultural organisations might shift their mindsets and change their behaviours in order to evolve their ways of working. From how we can collaborate better to how public and private funders can fund more intelligently. We've undertaken research, published provocations, and rolled our sleeves up with our colleagues on the front line, designing, developing, experimenting, and prototyping new approaches to mission, model, and money. And you can read all about what we've been doing on our website. Our name comes from the concept developed by Clare Miller, now president of the F.B. Heron Foundation in the USA, which she calls the Iron Triangle. She proposes that for not-for-profit organisations to be viable, including those in the arts, they need to get significantly better at managing the interdependent relationship between mission and programmes, organisational capacity and financial capacity. Our goal in times of increasing uncertainty, accelerating change and more recently growing austerity has been to help make the arts more resilient. We believe that the more resilient our arts and cultural community are, the more able they will be to support the creation and experience of great art, and the more great art gets produced and the more people engage with it, the more its power will help build the collective resilience we believe humanity will need to navigate the turbulence ahead. So that's a little bit about MMM. Back to the big question, can the arts help save the planet? That question might sound incongruous to you. A role for the arts that you would not normally consider, a role that might even feel a bit far-fetched. After all, in our culture, in an everyday kind of way, the arts are primarily viewed as something to enjoy in our spare time, an activity we engage with in a variety of ways, with friends, family, and on our own. We go to exhibitions and performances, watch movies, read novels, visit museums. Arts Council England's most recent research showed that 2/3 of adults in England had gone to at least one of the 20 arts events surveyed in the preceding 12 months. We also express our own creativity by singing in our local choir, taking and curating our own photographs, writing, painting, developing a craft, dancing competitively, writing plays. Research by the Voluntary Arts Network tells us that over half the UK adult population is involved in what they call the voluntary arts and crafts, by which they mean those arts and crafts that people undertake for self-improvement, social network and leisure, but not primarily for payment. If you're involved professionally with art and culture, and in the broader cultural and creative industries nearly 2 million of us are, you'd probably have a different view. As an artist or a performer, your creativity would be what drove your life, and with any luck, the way that you earned your living. And if you worked in government and policy-making circles, you'd have a different view again. I'd hope that you'd recognise the arts as a national asset and be committed to co-designing and co-investing in the enabling frameworks that would help realise their full potential socially and economically. And arguments for the importance of the latter have been well made in recent years, not just in the UK, where the 2007 Staying Ahead report states that the UK has the largest creative sector, which includes the arts, in the EU, but across the world. The 2010 UN Conference on Trade and Development report states that whilst the 2008 world financial crisis provoked a drop in demand and a contraction of 12% in international trade, world exports of creative goods and services have had an annual growth rate of 14% over 6 consecutive years. So perhaps those are the predominantly held views most of us hold about the role of art and culture in our lives, the personal, the professional, and the more governmental. What I want to do this evening is open up another view, an additional perspective to all of those, one that is not yet included in common discourse about the role of art and culture in our society, but which we feel needs to be. One which proposes that art and culture has a huge and still relatively untapped potential to help us respond to the bigger-than-self problems we face, the global challenges of resource scarcity, climate change, and social injustice, which, if we don't start resolving fast, could wipe us out and much of the rest of life on this planet as well. One which MMM has just begun researching, developing, and promoting through an international platform called Rethink. Let me begin opening up this new view by presenting a bit more about the context as we see it, recognising that this worldview is still far from being universally shared, and recognising that some people, such as James Lovelock and Martin Rees, are much gloomier than others about our prospects. Our view, along with a growing number of others around the world, is that we're coming up against the limits of our planet's capacity to support us and are living beyond our means. The World Wildlife Fund calculates that we're currently exceeding the planet's regenerative capacity at about 30%. If every human alive today consumed natural resources and emitted carbon dioxide at the same rate as the average American, Frenchman, and German, their Living Planet report said, we'd need at least another 2 Earths. We know we only have one. Yet despite growing awareness that our planet has limited natural resources and finely balanced and interdependent ecosystems, many of us, especially in the West, continue to selfishly squander them. And as a result, key assets that we depend on are getting scarcer. According to the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, approximately 15 out of 24 of the ecosystem services examined are being degraded or used unsustainably, including fresh water. We're changing our climate, The Guardian reporting recently that 19 countries, covering nearly 20% of the global land area, experienced their hottest recorded years in 2010. Our current model of economic growth, which has encouraged our overconsumption, is broken, our well-being is declining, and inequality is rising, fueling conflict, mass migration, poverty, and many other social problems. Things have to change, and we need to act fast if we are to find new economic and social paradigms that recognise the limits of our finite planet and enable all life to flourish. MMM's view, along with a growing number of others, is that we need to begin by transforming the values of our society and economy within a generation. We need to find more ways to understand each other, disrupt vested interests, and imagine and create more sustainable ways of living. MMM's belief is that art and culture are integral to this process of evolutionary change. Art and culture are one of the most participative, dynamic, and social forms of human behaviour. Their capacity to trigger reflection, generate empathy, create dialogue, and foster new understanding means that they can offer a powerful and democratic way of expressing, sharing, and shaping values. By helping to create an environment and a state of mind directly conducive to the creation and development of new ideas, they challenge the status quo and open up spaces where anything is possible. They can help us build new capabilities and understand how to imagine a different way of being. And they can enable us to design useful and meaningful things and are increasingly the basis of livelihoods and enterprises that are motivated by much more than financial profit. I'm going to pause for a moment before expanding on why we believe art and culture are integral to how we navigate this great transition, as the New Economics Foundation and others have named it, to explain the definition of art and culture that we have chosen to use, as it's very important and quite rightly comes up as a question a lot. In the early part of this 21st century, and in most parts of the world, art and the arts are most commonly used to refer to the following set of practices: visual arts and crafts, dance, reading and writing, theatre, drama and music. To that most common set of descriptors, we would also add film, video, design, heritage-based cultural practices, and what Wolf Brown call the living arts, activities that reflect common forms of creative expression that are not typically valued as arts activities, especially among populations from different cultural traditions, and emerging artistic activities that arise from the more widespread availability of digital imaging and other technology-based creative tools. The word culture is most commonly used in two ways: as excellence of taste in the fine arts and humanities, also known as high culture, and as an integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief and behaviour that depends upon the capacity for symbolic thought and social learning, and the set of shared attitudes, values, goals and practices that characterise institutions, organisations and groups. The anthropologist Clifford Geertz captures the relationship of the arts with culture beautifully for me. He said, "Without men, no culture, but equally and more significantly, without culture, no men. We are, in sum, incomplete and unfinished animals who complete and finish ourselves through culture, and not through culture in general, but through highly particular forms of it." We've chosen this broader, more inclusive definition very deliberately for two reasons. Firstly, it represents a much truer, more democratic reality of the spectrum of creative expression than that generally identified, certainly by many Western governments and policymakers, who tend to default to an elite definition of the arts, what Clive Bell would have called the cold white peaks. Secondly, it deinstitutionalises creative expression, allowing us to focus our attention as much on the everyday kinds of practice that I spoke about at the beginning, as the practice of those for whom it is a profession. Our interest is in deepening our understanding of what happens to all of us when we actually take part in these activities, not just the chosen few, and how what happens might be relevant to our mighty purpose, as George Bernard Shaw would say, of showing how art and culture's expressive energy can be harnessed to help us make that leap to a livable world. So armed with that definition and imbued with the belief that engaging with art and culture can offer practices and processes which could help individuals, communities and societies build the social and economic ideas and the relationships to imagine and design a more livable world, what steps do we need to take to prove our case and answer that question? Can the arts help save the planet? With a yes.